Hi, this is Jacob Coble, Tallahassee, Leon County GIS. This will cover uh, the adjusting the color adjustment of old historical aerial imagery. Of course, this is black and white imagery, and so this image is from 1941. It's um, basically downtown Tallahassee and towards the south a bit. And this is really beyond the scope of what I want to discuss, but you see this image covers quite a large area, and there's markings, and yes, that's 1941. That's what that 401 is, so that's the date, and uh, that was the name of the image. And so just to give you a background, one thing I did through a software called Irfan View, which is really good for some batch processes like clipping images. Uh, oh, and you see these marks here, and the how the image kind of fades towards the edge. So what I did, I took all I don't know, I'm trying to remember, over 100 images for 1941, and I use the software to clip them, so each image has just a limited area where the image is at its best. In other words, not over here in the edges where it's faded out or there's markings. And so I had clip versions of each image, and they do overlap a fair amount, but not as much as these images, and that gets rid of the uh, kind of unwanted areas where the quality of the image is poor and where all that overlaps anyways, so you don't need it anyways for our purpose of ultimately putting the images in a mosaic. Well, that all explained. Why don't I close this? So this was the original, what the original image looked like, scanned and everything. And so the clipped version, let me go to here. So when I clipped it, I came out with this, and this retained really the best parts of the image, and clipped out the bad areas towards the edge where it gets distorted and fades and whatnot. And so of course its neighboring images, meet it here and on the sides, and they overlap enough that we can deal with. But anyways, so what I've done here, so this is the original image as clipped to the extent I want, and so we're gonna leave that be as our comparison. Uh, and so I made just a copy of it, and it's called, has the word processed in it. So I just saved it as a different name. So we're going to adjust this image and see if we can make things look clearer than what we originally came up with, and then when we've gotten things adjusted nicely in this new version, we'll just kind of look back and forth, and I think you'll be surprised at what you can do to enhance the quality of the old images, and at the same making them sharper, but not uh, overdoing it and introducing a lot of artifacts and everything. So it's kind of a fine balance. And speaking of fine balances, yeah, let's zoom in a bit and look around, and you can see uh, that there's some real light areas and real dark areas next to each other. And so one of the things we'll be doing is uh, trying to balance that out a bit, so the dark areas aren't quite as dark, and the light areas where that it's really so light that it's just about washed out. Uh, we'll get it so those areas are a little bit darker, and uh, we might actually be able to bring out some detail that's now virtually washed out in the light areas of the image, and we might be able to bring in some detail in some of the what are now the darker areas of the image where it's just kind of a blob, but we might be able to get a little more definition in some things uh, there as well. So uh, again, the word is balance. So we have a lot of things we want to try and balance. Lighter versus darker, and make the dark areas a little lighter, and make some of the lightest areas a little darker, and see if we can uh, increase the contrast without overdoing it and making things look pixelated. So, my first step will be to use the Magic Wand tool, which is really an indispensable tool in Photoshop, and um, allows you to make selections, but you can select uh, in uh, according to different criteria. Here I have the setting tolerance is 10 and anti-alias, and one big option is contiguous or not. And I don't have contiguous selected. If I had contiguous selected, if I clicked on some blob, oh, why don't I go ahead and do that? Some isolated blob here, it just uh, selects that immediate area where it finds the pixels that are contiguous. And if I so let me deselect that. But actually what I want to do, I want to click on a darker area in the whole image and let the magic wand tool select all the darker areas, and when we have that selected, we'll try to lighten them a bit. And so I'm going to click somewhere, not sure exactly where, just kind of, this looks like a darker area. And so that looks, so all that dizzy looking, I don't know what you call it, that's actually shows what our live selection is. And we want to modify that a little bit by feathering it. And there's a feather tool that is very useful. We don't want to just kind of select every pixel and have just a sharp demarcation between what was selected and what was not, uh, because that will kind of give what was selected kind of a boundary, and you'll just clearly see what was selected and that we adjusted versus what wasn't selected. And using the feather selection, and I think four or five is a good choice here for the feather radius. This will kind of blend where it'll kind of soften the uh, selection, so it's not so very sharply defined. So we'll actually be able to make a selection, and it will and adjust it, and what we've adjusted will kind of blend in better with the neighboring pixels. So I'm going to hit OK on that, and watch how it changes a bit. You see the selected areas, they're a little more, I'd say, generalized, perhaps. It's feathered now, so that when we try to lighten the darker areas, it won't be quite as evident where the boundaries are between what we've selected and what we didn't select. Um, so there's various ways we can lighten or darken features in an image. And in the image menu, there's all kinds of tools. Um, Look under adjustments. We have brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, and there's I could get into a long discussion about which tool to use for what circumstance, but I'll just focus on what we are using and describe that. And so the tool I want to use to lighten the dark areas, mostly vegetation it looks like in this image, we will use the curves tool for that. So I'll open that, and one thing about the uh, curves tool, it has some settings already in it that you can just pick. And for channel, it's gray. Obviously, it's a grayscale image. Uh, if it were a color image, say an RGB image, we could have all RGB channels selected, or just red or green or blue selected. But here we're just obviously it's a grayscale image, which is what it should be. Uh, and So I want to lighten that, and there's uh, and a lot of these I've found very useful for different things. Anyways, it's kind of worthwhile to experiment with uh, each of these settings and just observe what changes take place, and you'll get a good feel how to use these tools. Now in this case, I want to use the want to lighten the image. I'm going to use the lighter setting, and it says lighter RGB. Just don't yeah, don't worry about that. It is still a grayscale image. It won't suddenly convert it to RGB or do anything funny like that. This will just make the image lighter. So I select that, and you might have seen it made it a little lighter, and I'm going to hit OK. And I still have my selection. What I'm going to do is go back to the curves tool once again, and um, do it. Do the same. Use the same tool again. Now I could just manually adjust the lightness and all that, and use the lighter tool only once. But in this case, and for demonstration purposes, it's just simpler to just use that tool twice, and that will we've applied it once, and we're going to apply it yet again on the same selection rather, and that will make it lighter still. And so you can kind of see that the there's not such a stark contrast between the lighter and the darker areas. And so I'm going to deselect that, and it might even be a little more evident. Now the image still isn't all that clear, and there's still a few things we want to do. And so let's see, I'm going to zoom in on some of the lighter areas. Zoom out a little bit. Okay. And our magic wand tool again. I'm going to select some of the lightest areas, and I want to select areas that are still light, but a little less light than what I automatically selected. So if I hold the shift key down, and I'm gonna select, I'm going to click on that. That's still pretty light. Uh, so I think that's pretty good. So it's selected the lighter parts of the image, but not everything that's not dark. It's kind of a judgment call how you want to select things, and sometimes you might make your selection and do your adjustments and decide that's not quite what you want. Uh, as you work with this stuff, it's good to take notes, and when you find something that works that might work well for other images, certainly you definitely want to have that all written down and uh, very clear in your mind as to what you want to do. And for anything that doesn't work, you want to kind of at least keep a mental note of that so you don't just forget and make the same mistake. And anyhow, so I have the lighter area selected, and wow, what would I do next? I'll just change, make some brightness adjustment. Oh, no, not quite. I need to feather this also. And so I will just do the same feathering I did on the darker area. And you see that kind of smoothed out. And so we'll tweak the lighter areas a bit, and they'll it won't be so sharp a contrast between what we've adjusted and what we haven't. It'll kind of blend in together, hopefully. So on this one, what I want to do is make the lighter areas just a little bit darker. That's one of the things I want to do. So we'll go to the curves tool once again, and this time instead of lighter, we will, drumroll please, pick darker. Yeah, that was predictable, wasn't it? Okay. And you can see now, you might see some details that pop out a little bit that were kind of washed out before. Why don't I cancel that and do that again? You can, and just look at some of the lighter areas. So I'm going to cancel, and curves, darker, and you can see maybe a little bit more detail came out that was before it was washed out in the image. But we haven't made things so much darker that it looks like we over adjusted anything. And so I'm going to click OK on that. And a second thing I'm going to do with the lighter areas selected, the curves tool once again. It seems to be my favorite tool today. We'll go to the there's several tools or settings dealing with contrast, and I'm going to pick medium contrast, and this will bring out a little bit more of the detail that was kind of faded out in the lighter areas of the image. This is one of the things you don't want to overdo. You can easily overdo, like if I want the strong contrast or something like that. So I'm going to click on medium contrast, and this will subtly bring out a little more detail. And one thing, I won't get into a lot of detail, but you see the curve here is a little different for each setting. But anyways, I'm going to click OK on that. And now we'll deselect all of that, everything we've selected. And so now we just have the overall image, nothing selected. Um, and I think things are taking form pretty nicely here. We eliminated, we lightened the areas that were real dark, and we darkened areas that were too light, and we brought out maybe a little bit more contrast in some of the lightest areas. So what I'm going to do now is overall I'm going to uh, use the curves tool once again, and I mentioned the tools or settings dealing with contrast. In this case, I'm going to apply medium contrast on the whole image, and you see there that made things look sharper. We could zoom in a bit. Made things look sharper. It also made things look darker in the image. It darkened everything. So, um, so how do we maybe make things sharper, but we don't make the overall image darker than we want it to be? So there's a tool for that. I'm going to um, adjust the exposure, and so this is a different way of lightening other than the curves tool. There's a gamma correction. I'm going to, oh, let's slide it around here. Woo, that's a little bit too faded. So the gamma correction tool, we can make things lighter or darker overall. And so I'm going to make this just a little lighter. So a gamma correction of 1, that's unchanged. That's what originally, or that's what we were left with just a minute ago. So I'm going to lighten it a little bit, but not too much. Something like that, maybe. Um, and it's a little bit lighter, but um, let's see. It's a little bit lighter, but not overdone. So I'm going to click OK on that, and let's zoom in a bit. And you can see the it looks a little more even as far as extremes of lightness and darkness. Um, yeah, it's a little. There's still a little bit. You know, you can't get everything perfect because the original imagery. You know what we're dealing with here is not. Um, it's pretty good for what it is, but obviously it's not modern imagery. So, but there are a few things we can do to sharpen this even more. And one really powerful tool, it's called, and again, you can go overboard on sharpening and make a mess of things. So, um, but in this case, this tool will work well. It's called Smart Sharpen, and it does pattern recognition, and it can do some amazing stuff in the right circumstances. And I think this is a right circumstance for this tool. So we'll bring that and I'll accept the defaults. Although there's a lot of things you could experiment with adjustments, but um, for this purpose, I think the defaults are fine. So I'm going to click OK, and let's zoom in a little bit. And you can see the things look a little sharper. Why don't I go back? I can undo the Smart Sharpen and redo it, and us just kind of go back and forth real quick. So this is with Smart Sharpen, and I'm going to undo it. You see how blurry that is? I'm going to redo it. See that that worked pretty nicely. I'm going to undo it again. I'm going to redo it. Yeah, that helped a lot. Um, and finally, I think I can get away with one more sharpen tool, and that's called Unsharp Mask. It's kind of a counterintuitive name, uh, but um, this is a good tool for it kind of selectively sharpens areas, um, and well, I'll just click OK, see what we get. Might be a little hard to tell a difference. I'm going to undo Unsharp Mask, redo it. You can see a little bit of a difference yet, and it was a little iffy whether I needed that last step or not, but I think we're okay using that. Um, so some of the things you can see here, you can see like tree. This look like palm trees maybe. You can see the fronds or branches or whatever on some of the trees even. You can see detail in the buildings. You can even see it looks like different uh, colorations on the roof. And so this is about as good as the imagery will get. I think these were like 10 buildings, 10 as in the metal, and so those roofs, you might, it looks like you could see seams on the roofs, and you can see features in that building. Well, let's compare that against. Let's zoom out first of all. So that's what we're left with. That's I think that's how I'll have that. Uh, and and this is the original image. Let's zoom out. So it was the original image, and this is the processed image. And here the dark areas are lighter. The lighter areas, the very highlights. Not every lighter area is a little darker, and we hopefully in a um, intelligent way did some sharpening to the image. Again, without overdoing it. It's easy to overdo sharpening and introduce artifacts. And even zoomed out at this scale, you can see uh, clarity and lack of clarity. Like even here, look at the uh, how the lighter and darker areas look more balanced in the processed image. Now now you need to find the same area. Okay. I think it's there, right? Yeah, that's pretty close. So this is the original, and this is processed. Original, processed, original, processed, and it seems like the darker features are a little more hopefully smoothly represented. Now it also brought out some scratches in the original image, and so there's anyways, but for the most part, it brought out the detail we wanted without introducing a lot of crazy artifacts into the image. So this is the original, and see how fuzzy it looks. And this is a lot sharper, original, and the process, original, processed. So even look, you can look at the buildings, and there's so many features that stand out better. Um, you can see cars in the streets better. On the trees themselves, you can even see a little bit of detail even in that, even in the vegetation. Uh, so like look at that tree right there, unprocessed and processed. You can see a bit of detail, and so I think we did a pretty good job just adjusting all this. And anyways, when I'm not narrating this, you can actually go through go through this and do this pretty quickly once you've done that a few times, and you have a good idea of what settings to use. You can actually go through this rather quickly. And so for the countywide, I didn't process every image like this. I just, the areas of high interest, obviously populated areas, areas of historical interest, got a little more, manual adjustment to them than other areas. So, but there you go. It's the processed imagery is quite a bit sharper than the unprocessed, and we haven't introduced really any uh, unacceptable artifacts to the imagery. Uh, it all is quite an improvement over what it was. And you see the detail on that versus the original. So we did about as good as we're going to do on that. So I think I think this is about the best we can do. And so let's zoom back out. So my next step would be to save that image. Um, let's see. I'm not sure. Make sure I'm not overwriting something I might want to keep in that. So I'll save that real quick. And again, compare it against the original image. Um, even zoomed way out, you could see a difference. So that's how you fine tune a historical aerial image and bring out some nice detail in it, even uh, even though it's not like modern imagery, it's still pretty good, and you know it's all we have for certain periods of time in history. Um, so until we invent a time machine, the best we can do is make good use of our historical documents and preserve them, and even where we can enhance them for better and more convenient use. So that's that's what we can do in Photoshop. So I hope that will give you some ideas on some of your projects.